You're listening to Overwatch League Daily, your daily source for Overwatch League news, scores, and more. Here's your host, KickedTripod.
Good morning, Overwatch League fans. This is your Overwatch League Daily episode for April 12th, 2018. A quick piece of news, the Overwatch League gear store has been updated with new team jackets, sweatpants, t-shirts, and socks. Head over to gear.blizzard.com to get some new gear. Let's jump right into your 2-minute rundown brought to you by patreon.com/OWL Daily Show. Overwatch League Daily is completely supported by its listeners, and for as little as $1 a month, you can help make sure that we can keep making episodes for you 5 days a week. For the first match of the evening, we had the Shanghai Dragons, who are sporting a new look in Stage 3, taking on the LA Gladiators. While the Dragons would see the return of Dia into the lineup, the Gladiators would have to go without Fissure and Asher, who both fell ill to the flu going around the Gladiators HQ. Despite the last-minute lineup changes, the Gladiators would still complete the sweep 4-0. For the second match of the evening, we would see the San Francisco Shock, who took a decisive victory over the Gladiators last weekend, go up against the LA Valiant, who have yet to drop a single map in Stage 3. Shock fans would be excited to see the Overwatch League debut of Architect, but ultimately would see San Francisco fall short as the LA Valiant would sweep the Shock 4-0 and keep their perfect stage alive. Finally, we would see the Dallas Fuel take on the Seoul Dynasty. In this match, we would see OGE play his first series after his 4-match suspension in March. The Dallas Fuel were just 6-16 going into yesterday's match, but have kept the Dynasty close in their previous two series, losing 2-1 on January 10th and 3-1 on February 28th. The Dynasty would take wins on Volskaya Industries in Nepal, while the Dallas Fuel would take Nimbani and Route 66. On Oasis, the Dynasty would win the map and take the series 3-2. So that's it for your 2-minute rundown. Tonight we've got Boston Uprising taking on the New York Excelsior, the London Spitfire going up against the Florida Mayhem, and the Philadelphia Fusion going up against the Houston Outlaws. The matches start at 4 p.m. Pacific at overwatchleague.com. I was originally supposed to sit down with Bren yesterday, but we had to move to today's to some scheduling issues. But I asked Bren some questions about Boston, the Spitfire, Sinatra and Super, and Shanghai's new lineup. Hey Bren, welcome back to the show. I want to jump right into things, and let's start by talking about the elephant in the room, which is the Boston Uprising. I don't want to kind of address kind of the drama and the details around there, but I do want to talk about the squad moving forward without Dream Casper. Dream Casper was obviously a really pivotal point for the Boston Uprising and their success in Stage 2, Stage 1, Stage 3. What do you expect to see from Boston in terms of their lineup this week?
Well, for one, we're going to be seeing a lot more mistakes, which I'm okay with. The guy was an absolute beast in Contenders Season 0, and now he's going to be filling in, admittedly, some big shoes, but the guy mistakes himself is what I'm talking about. He's definitely a standout player, and Boston have already experimented with putting him in that specialist role as a Sombra player. I agree with that. I think that's a great choice for him. It translates nicely, because he was known as a Tracer player back in the day. But now, obviously, he's going to have to flex over to a lot of different roles. I know for a matter of fact that Mistakes' Widowmaker is also very good, so they can run the Tracer Widowmaker composition still as well if they choose to. I think it's going to be honestly great. Like, Boston, realistically, are still a very good team. They've actually lucked out a little bit in having Mistakes available to play for them.
So I don't do this very often on the show, but sometimes the community comes up with a discussion in Discord or on Reddit, and I think it would be really interesting to address it on the show from somebody who maybe has a little bit more experience and insight into these types of situation. There are some people who believe that there should be some sort of an exemption for Boston to be able to pick up a free agent in light of recent news, or at least to be able to pick from their Toronto Esports Academy team. Do you think that this would ever be an okay solution if something like this were to happen?
So I personally believe that I don't think there should be any exemption at all for Boston to pick up a new player. I think it sets a bad precedent if they did that to other teams unnecessarily. I mean, again, teams would probably try and exploit that somehow. So I think that there really shouldn't be an exemption, and that's as simple as it is. You need consistency for a league of this size to really succeed.
So last question about Boston. It's a little bit more big picture. You kind of discussed it a little bit when we were discussing mistakes and in for Dreamcasper. But before this, the Boston Uprising were in serious discussions for a top 5 or potentially even a top 4 team. Where do you think they sit now with the trade deadline just passed last week?
I discussed this a little bit earlier, and as in the previous questions. And I mean, I went on and on and on about mistakes, and I do truly believe that Boston is still a playoff team, even with mistakes as their new DPS player, because again, they can still run the Tracer Sombra strategies. I know mistakes is very well adjusted to the Widowmaker as well, so I mean, they can run pretty much the most powerful compositions at the moment. And realistically, there's going to be a lot of pressure on Gamsu, everyone else, to really sort of build around mistakes and try and enable him and not really rely so much on the carry potential that they once had. But yeah, it's definitely a weakened Boston, but definitely they're not out of it, not by any means.
Let's talk a little bit about the London Spitfire. The Spitfire start out this stage 0-2 for the first time ever. Should people be concerned about London going forward?
I feel like people should have been concerned about London from stage 2, to be honest. This is a team that, has been inconsistent throughout every stage so far. Now, despite that, they always make playoffs at the end of the stage, so I don't think you can be too worried. And, we've seen what this squad is capable of. Every single player on this roster is exceptional, including the recent pickups they've just had. I believe Tizzy coming into the roster as well. So I think if you're a London fan, you shouldn't really be concerned because your team has always been this inconsistent. The issue I have with this is how do they really solidify, my issue with London, that is how do you really solidify, a decent game plan, some consistent results, some of the fundamentals. Fundamentals is a word I overuse a lot, but I think it just really summarizes what a lot of these teams are missing, because often they will play incredibly well. They play like they're the number 1 seed in the Overwatch League, and then the next game, suddenly they're fielding a completely different set of players, and you're wondering what the hell is going on with this decision making. So, maybe you can pin that onto the coaching. It's hard to tell. The only thing that we really get a glimpse at is the actual players themselves. So it's hard to really tell if there's any outside influences coming from that direction. But Spitfire, again, I'll just reiterate, you don't really need to worry about them if this is your favorite team. They've always been quite inconsistent. They probably don't want to be, but we do know that they're more than capable of bouncing back.
The San Francisco Shock finally have Super and Sinatra in their lineup, ready to play. We saw them a bit last week. How do you think these two have played so far?
Good question, because San Francisco Shock are a team that were, just sort of meandering through stage 1 and 2, not really picking up consistent results, not really getting the wins that they needed, and now they've got their revamped roster in. They've got Sinatra, they've got Super, and so far I've been pleasantly surprised, because what do you know, Sinatra is an absolute beast. I definitely say he's one of the better above average Tracer players that we have in the league. I don't think he truly contests on the level of maybe Sabiobi or Striker. However, we haven't really seen them tested too much. We're still week 1 into the Overwatch League of stage 3. So I'm going to need to see a few more games. But so far I've been pleasantly surprised by Sinatra's gameplay. Now, Super, on the other hand, that's a guy who I'm impressed by because he's come into this roster. We already know before he was in it, he was helping with coaching decisions, he was helping them spot mistakes, he was working with the roster since its inception, essentially, back in stage 1. He just hasn't been able to play because he's only just turned 18, and this is a guy with a big brain on him. He's a very cerebral player. I'm a big fan of how this team, San Francisco Shock, are looking so much more different now that they've got a consistent roster in. I think consistent is the word of the day with the Owl Daily today, because I just keep going on and on about it. But in my mind, this is a squad that's looking much better as a result of these recent additions that they've got.
All right, last question, then I'll let you get out of here. Shanghai, didn't have a great week last week or ever really. I think it's 9 total map wins in Overwatch League so far. But we do now have most of their new players, and we've gotten to see most of their new players. What, if any, improvements with the new lineup have you seen last week?
For one, I'm actually pretty impressed with Ado and Fearless. I think these two guys are really going to be cementing a core that the roster can build around, but my concern is with this communication, because once again you're mixing Korean players with Chinese players, and there's going to be these language and communication issues. And I think if there was any game where you needed communication, like out of every esports title, I think Overwatch is probably the most important when it comes to that. There's a lot of games where raw individual mechanical skill can get you by, but not Overwatch. This is a game that, yes, you can have those individual moments, but if you don't have the teamwork underlying, if you don't have the players setting you up, if you don't know what your team is doing, and if you can't communicate with them, you're never going to see results. You're always going to look bad because, they just can't really understand each other. And that's when we're really going to see results out of Shanghai, is, in my opinion, is once we've given it a few weeks, honestly. I don't think we're going to be seeing improvements in Stage 3. I was of the opinion that this is a team that we're going to be rapidly improving. I've since changed that opinion, and I now believe that Shanghai will get better, but it's a case of, they're going to look worse before they improve and before they look better. Just because of that one simple factor, the communication. That is a fundamental skill, and currently they're lacking it, not to anyone's fault, it's just the fact that they are these different nationalities.
My thanks to Bren for stopping by on the show today. If you're not already, make sure to follow him on Twitter @BrenCast. Tomorrow we're going to start something new, and that's going to be our guest host series. And that's where, rather than listening to me for an episode, host the show, bring you through the scores, instead I'm going to have a guest, somebody that you care about, host the show. And to start this off and to try this out, we're actually going to have Pixie, who we've had on the show quite a few times, go ahead and host an episode for us. So you won't be hearing my voice tomorrow. You will be hearing his. If you like the show, make sure to follow, subscribe on all the different outlets where you might be listening to the show. And of course, if you missed it, we did launch our new sister show, Overwatch Contenders Daily, hosted by Lemon Kiwi. That has all your contenders info for the major regions. There's only 2.5 episodes out right now, so go back and listen to those so you can get an idea for the format. Moving forward, just look for Overwatch Contenders in your podcast app. It's on this YouTube channel, or follow their Twitter @OWC Daily Show. That's going to do it for me today. I will be back on Saturday, I think it is, with Ham Tornado. She's been spectating Overwatch League a little bit, so we're going to talk a little bit about her experience there, as well as recap some of that night's matches. Thanks, guys. See you next time.